the next person I'm bringing up here on the stage, Mark Rothleader, the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the CAISO. I think any of you have had a chance to work with Mark, just know his contributions and his just persistence and his stamina and his creativity. Just a fabulous partner for me, a great guy, and I just wanted to turn the floor to him. Mark, great seeing you, bud.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good. Okay.
Nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
What I'm going to do today, since I've got the floor, I can say anything I want. But before I jump into the material, you always have to open up with a quote, right? So collaboration. And I was looking up online, what does collaboration mean? What's a nice quote? And one of the ones that resonated for me was, collaboration allows us to know more than we are capable of knowing by ourselves. If I apply that to action, I think I would say collaboration allows us to do more than we are capable of doing ourselves. And I would say this really epitomizes what's happened since 2020. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the amount of collaboration that's occurred in the state and across the region. And I want to name some names, okay? And I know by naming names, you're going to also not name some names that you should name. But there are some names that I do have to acknowledge. Ana Santos, Karen Douglas, Alice Reynolds, now President Reynolds, they were true partners with us trying to figure out a way how to recover from the 2020 events and make things better. Vice Chair Gunda and his team at the CEC, Pete Scala and the CPUC team, Carla Namath and the DWR team, were all critical partners to the success that we achieved in the heat wave of 2022. Our partners at the utilities, Bong, thank you. Our partners at the utilities within the state, our partners with utilities across the region, developers of new resources, operators of existing resources, all of them delivered on what needed to be provided during this time. Obviously, demand response providers, battery providers, delivered. I know you're going through your list. Who did I not? I'll get emails later, I understand. Elliot, he came in at just the right time. His collaborative style was perfect for the collaboration that we needed to do after the 2020 event. And it was just critically important. Finally, I want to recognize the men and women who operate the grid, okay? They have a difficult job. They have to take in immense amounts of data, process that data, apply judgment, do the right things, communicate, collaborate, and do it all in real time. And they're using the tools that we provide them, and it's a stressful condition, and they do it excellently. And they did that excellently in September. This could not have been achieved, and I know Chair Hochschild likes to refer to it as the heat storm. We could not have navigated this heat storm without the collaboration of everybody I just indicated and more. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a summary. I know you're going to get a better, more detailed discussion next week as we go through the heat wave report. And I know you all were doing the same thing I was doing because you were texting me, you were emailing me, you were playing the ISO operations game on your phone and trying to see if the lights would stay on and see how to operate reliably the grid. I thought that app was great because you can really see a lot from the app. So the heat wave was obviously a big event, and it was an intense heat wave. This graph, which Guillermo Bautista Alderete and our group produced, just illustrates how extensive that heat wave was, how long it lasted, how intense it was for a long period of time. The x-axis is the amount of the megawatts, 50,000 megawatts, and it's a comparison to other months and distributions of load in other months of the summer. And you can see how September was just a blowout in terms of the intensity and the breadth of that heat wave. If we look at the temperatures, we know that the temperatures, both the maximum and the minimum temperatures across the West were at record levels. But if you look at this graph carefully, you can draw a line kind of this way, and you start to see some opportunities. The Southwest, 110 degrees in Phoenix, was not at record levels, which allowed them to have some surplus energy. The Northwest, yes, there were records, but they just came off of a good snowpack, good hydro year, and their temperatures in the 10-day heat wave, they maxed out in the earlier part, and on September 6th, and that time, their temperatures had moderated. And that created that opportunity to leverage some of that supply and share in that supply, and the diversity of those temperatures allowed us to share capability across the West. The load itself, 52,061 megawatts. If you would have asked me, can we do 52,000 going into the summer, I would have said no, not doable. But we achieved it, and it was not just record load levels in the ISO, but it was record load levels across the West, across the RC. And if you compare this to our previous record, which is 50,000 plus 2006, we were already at that level by 3 p.m., and we were above that record level for almost 3 hours on September 6th and other additional hours on other days. We talk about the peak, but we stress about the net peak. And the 52,000 makes the headlines, but the real challenge is that later, 6 p.m., 6 to 7 p.m., when you've got the ramp out of the solar resources, 13,000 megawatts ramping out over 3 hours, and you're trying to ramp in other resources. What are those resources? Gas delivered. I know we're trying to reduce our reliance on gas resources, but on days like this, it becomes critically important and accounted for about 50% of our load. Imports. Imports are low in the middle of the day when we have additional energy. We can supply or not rely on as much imports in the middle of the day and save that energy for that evening hour. 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts of imports, including about 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts of Western energy imbalance transfers coming in, added to those imports. Those ramped up during that time. Batteries. I'll get into batteries in a second, but certainly batteries are a new addition, providing that net peak ramping capability. Hydro, even though we're in a low hydro condition, a drought condition, you can save the water off, and it does provide energy when you need it, and it's providing those reserves, which is great because you need to maintain both energy or meet your load plus reserves. But ultimately, you don't have the amount of energy over the time, but you do have it for that specific time. Demand response. Every time we had a little demand response, 800 megawatts, demand would come back. So we started with Flex Alert, we saw the reduction, the load started to come back. That was worrisome. Came back, 5 p.m., triggered reliability demand response, got the relief, load started to come back, or it certainly didn't drop. And it was that time into that flat period, you're still above 50,000 megawatts, and you're just waiting for the load to drop. I know you guys are all watching it too. Get to the 555, and as a result of all the collaboration, by the way, these new capabilities and having this demand response capability is a direct result of the collaboration that we did over the last 2 years. 555 came, we were in EEA3. EEA3, for those who don't know, means that we cannot maintain our operating reserve. In order to maintain the operating reserve, we now have to arm, not shed, arm firm load. And you can hang out in EEA3 for a while as long as you maintain your operating reserve, but there gets a point where you can't do that anymore, or you have a contingency event, in which case load is at risk. We did not get to that point. 555 came, your phone started to go off, people responded. I can't tell you how many people told me they got the alarm, they realized that we were in trouble, and they turned the air conditioner off. They stopped cooking for a few minutes. They stopped charging their car for a few minutes. And that got us the relief of about 1,000 megawatts to 2,000 megawatts over a 15-minute period. My blood pressure went down. Elliot was just going, yes. And the operators called me and said, we've got high frequency. What do you want? We did not have a high frequency violation. We managed that. But that was perfect timing. I can't tell you how perfect that was. It was at a critical time, and it allowed us to get through that most critical time. And it was made very clear that tool is not available to us the next day. I won't get into all of it. 3 times that WEA has been used, and only once for this purpose. Batteries. Talk about collaboration and thoughtful planning. We have to go back in time, and I got to recognize some additional people. Nancy Skinner, Senator Skinner. Carla Peterman. They set in motion between legislation and CPUC policy to get 1,300 megawatts of new batteries on the system by 2020. We have 4,000 megawatts of batteries on the system. Alex Morris and Janice Lynn from CISA. They kept on pushing. They said this is important, and it was important. They were insightful, and if it wasn't for their effort and their association and their collaboration, we would not have had this type of performance of batteries that helped us get through this critical time. There will be a point where 4-hour batteries are not enough, and you need to find longer duration. You need to be able to charge longer. You won't have the energy, sufficient energy to charge them. But at this point in time, they were very helpful and they were critical, and we were able to navigate the charging of them and navigate the discharging when they were most needed. Can we improve? Yes, but we were able to do and use them the way we were expected to, and we will continue to improve on that. The Western energy imbalance market. We understand, and it delivered in terms of delivering when and where the energy was needed to maintain the reliability. It was the master collaborator, okay? And what I mean by that is it worked without having to do calls. It worked without having to call anybody. It worked automatically in delivering energy where and when it was needed. But it also produced an environment where we can collaborate and call each other. And we know who to call, and it created dialogue and relationships that would have not been there but for the Western energy imbalance market. It allowed Elliot and I and the operators to make calls, to check in with everybody. Are you okay? How much capacity do you have? Do you have any surplus? We're going to be in pain at this point. There may be exports that we can't support, letting you know. Everybody knew what was going on, and everybody was prepared, and we were as ready as we could be across the region, both because of the direct optimization of energy, but also those relationships that were built through the Western Energy Imbalance market. So, in summary, what went well? There's a lot that went well, and there's a lot that was luck did play a role. New clean energy capacity, that was not luck, that was planning and that was action. Could have we used this additional energy and capacity earlier? Certainly, sort of would have helped in 2020, but it's there now and we're continuing to build at rates unprecedented as we discussed yesterday. 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts a year of new capacity. Improved communication and coordination. Unlike 2020, where you didn't know 7 days out whether we were going into a tight condition, now you can see on the app the relationship and the differences between our load forecast and the capacity that we expect to have available. And you can see when those lines cross, that's going to be a tight day and that we need to be ready. We started sending that signal 7 days in advance, and I think that was critical to start taking action. And fortunately, those 10 days events played out over 10 days. And September 6th was not the first day, okay? And what I mean by that is we were able to learn and apply our learning instantaneously the next day to what we saw the previous day. And there are several situations where we learned from the previous day and applied that. And again, communicated, communicated, communicated. All the coordination did not happen in one day. This was a result of advanced coordination and collaboration over the several years. Elliott convened both this year and previous years, folks from across the West, across the utilities in the spring to basically tabletop and prepare for the summer and have that discussion. And those became critical for those communication channels and those relationships. Effective and proactive maintenance and outage coordination. We made sure the resources that we had available and transmission, if there was work going on, we canceled that work to the extent we could. We tested the resources to make sure they were available, and we tried to maximize the available supply capability going into those most critical days. Did every resource deliver? No. Resources break, and they're going to break during these hot temperature days. But I think we did an excellent job in trying to minimize the outage risks and manage the outages that we did have. Overall, I think the fleet really did deliver. It did stress me out earlier in the day when outages occurred, but some units came back. But overall, I think the fleet performed very well. DR, we talked about DR already. Setting up an emergency load relief program was instrumental in getting some additional relief. And I think we could still build upon that. But there's more to be done there, and we can do better. But getting additional demand relief and setting up those programs really helped, and getting the funding for the strategic reserve for those contingency events really helped. The West coordinated, talked to each other, prepared, and they were there to support each other. There were emergency actions, emergency requests. We were both receiving emergency assistance and providing emergency assistance at different times in the day. And that allowed us to collaborate and make sure that everybody across the West got through that without having to shed load. The strong Western energy imbalance market performed well, and like I said, the collaboration and relationships that it created allowed for strong communications along the way. The geographical diversity, I think it was said yesterday, the West is so rich with a diverse set of resources geographically and in terms of the fuel source. We need to leverage that diversity and unlock that diversity and understand it, but that diversity helped us when we most needed it. There's opportunities for improvement, there's opportunities for learning. Certainly. You don't go through this type of heat event every year, so you learn things and you see where things start to break down. And so those areas that we can strengthen, resource adequacy, and that's in progress. Huge amounts of new resource adequacy and procurement have been authorized, and we're in the middle of that, in the middle of a post-pandemic world where supply chain issues are a challenge. But we're working through that, we're tracking, we're trying to find those projects that are most, and those infrastructure that's most necessary are available and constructed. We need to continue to improve our load flexibility capabilities. In this day and age of technology, we should be able to manage load through means that doesn't require a human to go do something or respond to an alarm on their phone. We should be able to get to the point where devices, thermostats, air conditioners, pool pumps, loads are automatically reducing their consumption as a result of system conditions, and in a manner that the public doesn't even know it's happening. So that load flexibility capability, we know it exists. We need to continue to unlock it. Transparency and visibility. This is where things like EDAN come in. If we could know who's sufficient, who's got the capability, who's got the surpluses in a time frame before real time, in the day ahead, we can do more things, we can respond better, and we can be more responsive to reliability conditions. And we may be able to decrease the need of having to declare emergencies that then have ramifications in terms of supply and prices. So that visibility, knowledge up front, knowing who has what is going to be critically important and a real opportunity for improvement. We need to continue to work on our storage capability and how we're optimizing storage. Bring on more storage, get additional storage with longer duration capability, but we also have to figure out better ways to manage and optimize that storage so that it is charged when you need it and it is discharged at the most critical time. It would be great to say we don't need a strategic reserve set of resources, but the reality is that with climate change, the standard planning approaches of planning for a 1 in 10 event is not sufficient. And the public does not think 1 in 10 year event. They want no outage anytime, okay? And to achieve that, we need a better way, and the strategic reserve plays a role of providing that additional capacity just when you need it on those most critical conditions that are driven beyond the normal conditions, whether it be a heat wave or a fire. It's there when you need it, but you normally don't use it. And having that strategic reserve is important to achieving that higher level of expectation that's really between the 1 in 10 and what the public expects, and that is no outages. I think all this comes down to, again, strengthening communication, coordination with each other, trusting each other, talking truthfully to each other, and working through problems together, both within states, but across the region. I am certain that if we didn't communicate and develop the coordination and communication channels that we did, we would not have had the outcome that we did in September. At the end, collaboration is what we're trying to achieve through market design. We've unlocked a lot of that benefit, economic, environmental, affordable benefits, reducing costs to ratepayers through the real-time Western Energy Imbalance market. We've figured out how to better optimize resources across the West, how to provide and find that capability during emergency events, how to track GHG. But there's more to be done. And the EDAM can unlock more with optimized commitment, recognizing and managing uncertainty across the wider footprint, and knowing who has the capability to manage this uncertainty and sharing that when we can. Knowing who's sufficient and who's not. And there's going to be times where someone's not sufficient and the rest of the West will help out during that time. But if you don't know, you can't act. How to better provision transmission so it is available and it gets optimized for this better, the use of the system, and making sure that resources across the West are able to deliver to demand across the West. Unlocking that supply and load diversity, and further enhancing how we track GHG. That's the added benefits of EDAM, and that's what we're trying to deliver on in developing an EDAM design. And we hope that that will lead to further collaboration, whether it's under resource adequacy, which is already being done very effectively through the Western Resource Adequacy Program, but interoperability between resource adequacy programs is an opportunity. Broader resource planning, so that not everybody is just bringing on resources, developing resources for their own load, but they recognize what the diversity is across the West. And so you don't overbuild the system, but you build for the aggregate collective. Transmission planning. There's a lot to build. You better build the right things, and you better do it in a collaborative way. Otherwise, you may not build the right things, and you may be out of alignment between the resources and the needs of the system. And the last one, kind of overrides all this, is that through collaboration, we can unlock and enable innovation. There's a lot of ideas out there that are never get built or never get developed, but through collaboration, we can unlock that innovation and leverage the innovation, just like we did for batteries. We'll do for hydrogen, we'll do for nuclear in the long run. But that innovation and being able to innovate collaboratively is something that is very important driver for collaboration. So let me just end with a quote, because I think this helps close out the importance of collaboration. Competition makes us faster. Collaboration makes us better. Thank you.